Hi, welcome back. We're going to continue with the full stack open curriculum and now move on to part 1b, JavaScript. During the course, we have a goal and need to learn sufficient amount of JavaScript in addition to web development. JavaScript has advanced rapidly in the last few years, and in this course, we use features from the newer versions. The official name of JavaScript standard is ECMAScript. At this moment, the latest version is the one released in June of 2023 with the name ECMAScript 2023, otherwise known as ES14. Browsers do not yet support all of JavaScript newest features. Due to this fact, a lot of code run in browsers have been transpiled from a newer version of JavaScript to an older, more compatible version. Today, the most popular way to do transpiling is by using Babel. Transpilation is automatically configured in React applications created with Vite. We will take a closer look at the configuration of the transpilation in part 7 of this course. Node.js is a JavaScript runtime environment based on the Google's Chrome V8 JavaScript engine and works practically anywhere, from servers to mobile phones. Let's practice writing some JavaScript using Node. The latest versions of Node already understand the latest version of JavaScript, so the code does not need to be transpiled. The code is written into files ending with the .js that are run by issuing the command node name of file.js. It is also possible to write JavaScript code into the Node.js console, which is opened by typing node in the command line, as well as into the browser's DevTool console. The newest revisions of Chrome handle the newest features of JavaScript pretty well without transpiling the code. Alternatively, you can use a tool like JSBin. JavaScript is sort of reminiscent both in name and syntax to Java, but when it comes to the core mechanisms of the language, they could not be more different. Coming from a Java background, the behavior of JavaScript can seem a bit alien, especially if one does not make the effort to look up its features. In certain circles, it has also been popular to attempt simulating Java features and design patterns in JavaScript. We do not recommend doing this as the languages and respective ecosystems are ultimately very different. Okay, so in JavaScript there are a few ways to go about defining variables. Const x equals 1, let at y equals 5. So 1 and 5 are printed. Y plus equals 10. So you're just adding 10 to y. Console x, y, 1 and 15 are printed. 1 is some text. 1 and some text are printed. X equals 4 causes an error. So the reason why this causes an error is because if you use the const keyword to declare a variable, this variable can no longer be assigned a new value. So when you assign 1 to the variable x, if you want to assign 4 to the variable x again, that won't work with the const um, keyword. So const does not define a variable but a constant for which the value no longer needs to be changed. On the other hand, let defines a normal variable. In the example above, we also see that the variable's data type can be changed during execution. At the start, y stores an integer, at the end it stores a string. So here it starts off as y equals 5, which is a number or an integer, and then here is where it gets changed into a string. It is also possible to define variables in JavaScript using the word var. Var was, for a long time, the only way to define variables. Const and let were only recently added in the version ES6. In specific situations, var works in a different way compared to variables definitions in most languages. See JavaScript variables should you use let, var, or const on Medium, or keyword var versus let on JS tips for more information. During this course, the use of var is ill-advised and you should stick with const and let. You can find more on this topic on YouTube, e.g. var, let, and const, ES6 JavaScript features. So in other words, you can look at these links to find out more about the difference between var and let and const. But for the purposes of this course, we're just going to stick with const and let. Arrays. An array and a couple of examples of its use. So here t equals 1, minus 1, and 3. t push 5, const t length is 4 is printed because 5 was added to the array, and then console log t of 1 is minus 1 is printed. Yep, so that's the reason is array starts with the index 0, so this is the 0th position, and this is the first position. So t of 1 here is minus 1. T for each value, and then I'll just console log each number, each on its own line. So just looping through the array and then console logging the value for each value in the array. Notable in this example is the fact that the contents of the array can be modified even though it's defined as a const. Because the array is an object, the variable always points to the same object. However, the content of the array changes as new items are added to it. One way of iterating through the items of an array is using for each, as seen in this example. For each receives a function defined using the arrow syntax as a parameter. This is the function that got passed through to the for each method. For each calls the function for each of the items in the array, always passing the individual items as an argument. The function as the argument for each may also receive other arguments. In the previous example, a new item was added to the array using the method push. When using React, techniques from functional programming are often used. One characteristic of the functional programming paradigm is the use of immutable data structures. In React code, it is preferable to use method concat, which creates a new array with the added item. This ensures the original array remains unchanged. So rather than pushing 5, we concat it to create a new array. Yep, so T2 is the array with 5 added to the array, and T, the original array, remains the same. The method call t.concat 5 does not add a new item to the old array, but it returns a new array which, besides containing the items of the old array, also contains the new item. There are plenty of useful methods defined for arrays. Let's look at the short example using the map method. So here, M1 is an array that starts off as the T array, and then uh, it applies the map function to this array, and in this function everything is multiplied by 2. So instead of 1, 2, and 3, we get 2, 4, and 6. And that's the M1 array. Based on the old array, map creates a new array for which the function gives a parameter and is used to create the items. In the case of the example, the original array is multiplied by 2. Map can also transform the array into something completely different. So we can have, instead of the function multiply by 2 here, we can add a string and then have the value. So here, an array filled with integer values is transformed into an array containing strings of HTML using the map method. In part 2 of this course, we will see that map is used quite frequently in React. So this is like a precursor to what we'll be kind of using in React to map through arrays and then create components like that. Individual items of an array are easy to assign variables with the help of destructuring assignment. So we can have const equals this array, and then we can have const first, second, and rest. In this case, first will equal 1, second will equal 2, and rest will be an array for the rest of the values. So it'll be 3, 4, and 5. Thanks to the assignment, the variables first and second will receive the first 2 integers of the array as their values, and the remaining integers are collected into an array of their own, which is then assigned to the variable rest. Objects. There are a few different ways of defining objects in JavaScript. One very common method is using object literals, which happens by listing its properties within braces. So here's one object, here's another object, and here's a third object. The values of the properties can be of any type, like strings, integers, strings, arrays, objects. The properties of an object can be referenced by using the dot notation or by using brackets. You can also add properties to an object on the fly by either using dot notation or brackets. Okay, yep. The later of the additions has been done by using brackets because when using dot notation, secret number is not a valid property name because of the space in the character. So you can't have object dot secret space number. That won't work. So rather than doing that, you have you're using brackets so that the property can have a space. Naturally, the objects in JavaScript can also have methods. However, during this course, we do not need to define any objects with methods of their own. This is why they are only discussed briefly during the course. Objects can also be defined using so-called and constructor functions, which results in a mechanism reminiscent of many other programming languages. Java classes, despite this similarity, JavaScript does not have classes in the same sense as object-oriented programming languages. There has been, however, the addition of class syntax starting from version 6, ES6, which in some cases helps structure object-oriented classes. So if you want to look deeper into this, look up the prototype chain in JavaScript. That is how things are done behind the scenes. But there is a class syntactic sugar that was introduced with ES6 that makes it look as if JavaScript has classes. But behind the scenes, it's actually using um, something called the prototype chain. So if you want, you can delve deeper into this. Um, yeah, okay. So functions, we have already become familiar with defining arrow functions. The complete process, without cutting corners, of defining an arrow function is as follows. Okay, so this is the arrow function, and the function is called as can be expected. So you just sum 1 and 5 and you get a result, and result being 6. If there is just a single parameter, we can exclude the parentheses from the addition. So this is just shorthand. No longer you don't need the brackets like before. And if the function only contains a single expression, then the braces are not needed. In this case, the function only returns the results of its only expression. Now, if we remove console printing, we can further shorten the function definition. So you don't actually even need the return keyword. This form is particularly handy when manipulating arrays, e.g. when using the map method. Yes, so you can just pass this as a shorthand, and that will be t squared. So we'll just square the numbers. The arrow function feature was added to JavaScript only a couple of years ago with the version ES6. Before this, the only way to define functions was using the keyword function. There are two ways to reference the function. One is giving a name and a function declaration. So this is the one here. The other way is to define the function by using a function expression. In this case, there is no need to give the function a name, and the definition may reside among the rest of the code. So here we do an anonymous function, and then we assign it to the variable average. During this course, we will define all functions using the arrow syntax. So we use this syntax here, So having the arrow. Okay, exercise 1.3 to 1.5. We continue building the application that we started working on the previous exercises. You can write the code into the same project since we're only interested in the final state of the submitted application. Pro tip, you may run into issues when it comes to the structure of the props that components receive. A good way to make things more clear is by printing the props to the console as follows. If and when you encounter an error message, objects are not valid as a React child, keep in mind the things told here. So this was mentioned in the previous video. You don't want to render objects as React components. Course information, step 3. Let's move forward to using objects in our application. Modify the variable definitions of the app component as follows and also refactor the application so that it still works. Okay, so we have the course info app, And then, so let's go into the app component, and here is how the data is created like so. Rather than doing this, we're gonna create objects, and then for exercise 1.3, oops, the goal is to have it so that the app still works. I'll just start up the, yeah, so this is what our app looks like now. If I do this, there should be an error because it's no longer getting the right variables passed in as props. So let's go in and change all of these. So I think course is fine. It's just a string as before. With these parts, we have now part1.name. So it's part1.name. Part2.name, part3.name. So we just want to go into this object and use this name property to pass the string in. And then here we have part1.exercise1, exercises1, part2.exercises1. Part2.exercises2, and then part3.exercises3. Now in the totals, we want to have part1, part2, and part3. So that should fix everything. Let's refresh, no more errors, and the app is working. Actually, one sec. So number of exercises is now not a number. So we need to check why that is the case. Okay, so the reason is there's no numbering here. So now it works. Yep, so these are just exercises as a property of the part1 object. And here we're getting that. Okay, so that's exercise 1.3. Now exercise 1.4. Place the objects into an array. Modify the variable definitions of app into the following form, and modify the other parts of the application accordingly. So we're going to do this, and then instead of these three objects, we're going to have an array of objects. So then, rather than part, we'll have parts. Actually, that should be 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, and 2. 0, 1, and 2 with an S. Okay, so let's save that. Yep, once more it works and there's no errors. Note, at this point you can assume that there are always 3 items. There is no need to go through the arrays using loops. We will come back to the object of rendering items based on items in an array with more thorough exploration of the next part of the course. However, do not pass different objects as separate props. from the app component to the component's content and total. Instead, pass it directly as an array. Okay. So they want me to pass course, and then rather than passing them separately, pass the entire parts in there. Okay. Oops. So we've got an array of objects in here. Now in content we need to change it. So props, we can do props.parts mm, 0 dot name. Props dot parts 0 dot exercises. Um, and then just change the indexes to. So that's the contents done. The next one is we need to use the parts. So actually no, we need to get the total component working correctly. So we'll just be props dot parts 0 uh, props dot parts 1 and then props dot parts 2 dot exercises. Yep, when we refresh, the app looks the same. Okay, now we have exercise 1.5. Um, let's take the changes one step further. Change the course and its parts into a single JavaScript object. Fix everything that breaks. So now, rather having two variables, we're gonna have one whole object called course, name, and then include this stuff here into this course object. Const. Okay, great. Changes the course component, fix everything that breaks. Okay, so here we can just have course dot name, and then here we can just do course dot parts and course dot parts, and I think that fixes it. Refresh. Yep, no more errors, and the app looks like it's still working. Okay, yeah, so that's exercises 1.3 to 1.5. We'll just probably still have time to continue on. Object methods and the keyword this. Because this course uses a version of React containing React hooks, we do not need to define objects with methods. The contents of this chapter are not relevant to the course, but are certainly in many ways good to know. In particular, when using older versions of React, one must understand the topics of this chapter. So by older versions of React, they're specifically talking about class components. So rather than defining a component as a function like this, you can also define them as class components, which is the sort of normal way of doing things. Um, but most of the time now it's using functions. So arrow functions and functions defined using the function keyword vary substantially when it comes to how they behave with respect to the keyword this, which refers to the object itself. We can assign methods to an object by defining properties that are functions. So here is a function, and then this dot name refers to this property here. So this refers to the object of which this method is part of. Methods can be assigned to objects even after the creation of the object. So you can have this and then add a new method with a function that increases the age property. Let's slightly modify the object. Okay, yeah, so do addition. Do addition. 25 is printed. Now the object has the method doAddition, which calculates the sum of numbers given to us as parameters. The method is called in the usual way using the object auto doAddition 1 for, or by storing a method reference in the variable and calling the method through the variable. Reference to addition 10, 15. If we try to do the same with the method greet, we run into an issue. The reason is it's referring, so this reference to greet doesn't have the information that is this dot name. That's why it's coming out as undefined. When calling the method through a reference, the method loses knowledge of what the original this was. Contrary to other languages, in JavaScript the value of this is defined based on how the method is called. When calling the method through a reference, the value of this becomes the so-called global object, and the end result is often not what the software developer had originally intended. Losing track of this when writing JavaScript code brings forth a few potential issues. Situations often arise where React or Node, or more specifically, the JavaScript engine or the web browser, needs to call some method in an object that the developer has defined. However, in this course, we avoid using these issues by using this list JavaScript. This list JavaScript means for this course, we're going to avoid using this keyword. One situation leading to the disappearance of this arises when we set a timeout called greet function on the auto object using the set timeout function. As mentioned, this value of this in JavaScript is defined based on how the method is called. When set timeout is calling the method, it is the JavaScript engine that actually calls the method, and at that point, this refers to the global object. There are several mechanisms by which the original this can be preserved. One of these is using a method called bind. So we're binding the greet method to the original auto object. Calling greet auto.greet.bind auto creates a new function where this is bound to point to auto, independent of where and how the method is being called. Using the arrow functions, it is possible to solve some of the problems related to this. They should not, however, be used as methods for objects because then this does not work at all. We will come back later to the behavior of this in relation to arrow functions. If you want to gain a better understanding of how this works in JavaScript, the internet is full of material about the topic, e.g. the screencast series Understand JavaScript's This Keyword in Depth by egghead.io is highly recommended. Yeah, so you can just go here, and this is a quick little course that basically goes into detail on how this keyword works. Classes. As mentioned previously, there is no class mechanism in JavaScript like the ones in object-oriented programming languages. There are, however, features to make simulating object-oriented classes possible. Let's take a quick look at the class syntax that was introduced in JavaScript with ES6, which substantially simplifies the definition of classes or class-like things in JavaScript. In the following example, we define a class called person and two person objects. So here's the person class, and then we call that and create two new persons. One is Adam, the other one is Janya or Yanya. When it comes to syntax, the classes and the objects created from them are very reminiscent of Java classes and objects. Their behavior is also quite similar to Java objects. At the core, they are still objects based on JavaScript's prototype inheritance. This is the prototype chain that I mentioned before. The type of both objects is actually object, since JavaScript essentially only defines the types Boolean, null, undefined, number, string, symbol, big int, and object. The introduction of the class syntax was a controversial addition. Check out Not Awesome ES6 classes, or Is Class in ES6 the New Bad Part on Medium for more details. The ES6 class syntax is used a lot in old React and also in Node.js. Hence, an understanding of it is beneficial even in this course. However, since we're using the new hooks feature of the React throughout this course, we have no concrete use for JavaScript class syntax. So the idea is with classes and this keyword, obviously you'll benefit from knowing these, especially looking at legacy React code. But for the users of this course, we won't be going through classes or this that much. Okay, so JavaScript materials. There exists both good and poor guides for JavaScript on the internet. Most of the links on this page relating to JavaScript features reference Mozilla's JavaScript guide. It is highly recommended to immediately read a reintroduction to JavaScript JS tutorial on Mozilla's website. If you wish to get to know JavaScript deeply, there is a great book series on the internet called You Don't Know JS. Another great resource to learn JavaScript is javascript.info. The free and highly engaging book, Eloquent JavaScript, takes you from the basics to interesting stuff quickly. It is a mixture of theory and projects and exercises, cover general programming theory as well as JavaScript language. So this book is quite good. I think it's in the 4th edition now. Yep, 4th edition. Just released in 2024. So it's quite up to date, and you can read it free online. Yes. Okay. So Namaste JavaScript is another great and highly recommended free JavaScript tutorial in order to understand how JS works under the hood. Namaste JavaScript is a pure in-depth JavaScript course released for free on YouTube. It will cover the core concepts of JavaScript in detail and everything about how JS works behind the scenes inside the JavaScript engine. Egghead.io has plenty of quality screencasts on JavaScript, React, and other interesting topics. Unfortunately, some of the material is behind a paywall. Yeah, so these are just some extra materials that you can look at to learn a bit deeper on JavaScript. So that concludes part 1B of this curriculum here. In the next video, we will move on to part 1C. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.